Hello everybody. Right here we are on the top of a mountain and there's the ocean. Can't you see? I'll show you. There's complete, oh shoot, the dog. Leia's with us. Leia just knocked over her water. Can you hear the ocean? All right, let me move this over so I'm not sitting in a puddle of water. Okay, so we're reading Sir Gibbie today. It is a book by George MacDonald. He was a Scottish author from the 1800s. He was C.S. Lewis's spiritual mentor. And so if you understand, C.S. Lewis wrote the Narnia books and Tolkien was his BFF, best friend forever, right? And he brought him to Christianity. But I welcome all people of all faiths. We're going to enter this book. It's amazing. We're on a very pivotal part on this time. I just got a feeling from last time. I've read it before, but I don't always remember the order. So let me place this in the stand and let's begin. I guess it doesn't matter which way this is facing today. All right, because we don't, usually I walk all the way up here and I just didn't know if the ocean would be seen or not. Now, I ran part of the way. Let's go here. Sir Gibbie, I do this, if you've been with me, that I do this to show we're starting now, because sometimes I chat a little bit just to say hello. But I welcome all of you here. This channel is about equipping you spiritually, psychologically, physically, because we're always meant to go to our own edge. We're always meant to I mean, Jesus said in John 10:10, I come to give you life. That means we're meant to live this life to the fullest. And it may not look like the fullest when we sit down here on a mountain and read a book from the 1800s, but it actually is. So it was 222 when I said that. All right. All right, I'll just have to let that be my anyway. We're on chapter 20, the ambush. Now, Sir Gibbie was this orphaned boy from the town. He's basically mute, and so he can't speak, but he can hear. And he runs on his tiptoes. If you know any of these signs, then you know. All right, so anyway, chapter 20, the ambush. For more reasons than one, Fergus judged it prudent to tell not even Auntie Jean of his intention. So you'll just catch up. If this is the first one you're here with us, then just trust that you're here for a reason. Hopefully Leia will give us some entertainment in the background too. It's always fun to see animals in nature, even though she's domesticated-ish. All right. So anyway, Fergus is the son of this man who owns this farmland. But the man, the laird who owns the manor up in Glashruach, just a second. I'll give you some of my water. So Gibbie's this boy that always wants to be helpful. And so he was living in the hayloft, but he saw what the woman Jean did in the kitchen. And so he learned to do it, and he would go in and now, and do it early in the morning before people woke up. And now he's, they just don't know who's doing it. Like if there's an elf or a fairy, or they're calling it a brownie, you know. But so the laird of the land, like the lord, right, of the Glashruach, the higher up, who rents out this farmland to them, I guess. He wanted Fergus to go stay up all night and watch who does it. He's like, these dishes don't move of their own accord. The porridge doesn't get made. The fire doesn't get put on by its own. Come on, go find out what it is. So he's like, of course I'll look. And now he's a little scared, you'll see. Anyway, Fergus judged it prudent to tell not even Auntie Jean. Fergus's dad owns this farmhouse, and I think, anyway, and his aunt sort of runs the other part of the house. So, but waiting until the house was quiet, stole softly from his room and repaired to the kitchen at the other end of the long, straggling house, where he sat down and, taking his book, an annual of the beginning, let's see. Leia, come here, honey. You've got stuff in your eyes. Sorry, I want to take care of her. Look how cute she is. Okay. He took his book out, an annual of the beginning of the century. He began to read the story of Cathod and Eurelia. Having finished it, he read another. He read and read, but no brownie came. His candle burned into the socket. Okay, hold on. Usually I have the leash around my leg. I'll just sit on it, hold on. She keeps pulling my backpack everywhere. That's why I don't do that, I guess. All right, let's go. Okay, so his candle burned into the socket. He lighted another and read again. Still no brownie appeared, and hard and straight, as was the wooden chair on which he sat, he began to doze. Presently he started, wide awake, fancying he heard a noise, but nothing was there. He raised his book once more and read until he had finished the stories in it. For the verse he had no inclination that night. As soon as they were all consumed, he began to feel very eerie. His courage had been sheltering itself behind his thoughts, which the tales he had been reading had kept turned away from the object of dread. Still deeper and deeper grew the night around him, until the bare, soulless waste of it came at last, when a brave man might welcome any ghost for the life it would bring, and ever as it came, the tide of fear flowed more rapidly, until at last it rose over his heart and threatened to stifle him. The direst foe of courage till at last it rose over his heart, and threatened to stifle him. The direst foe of courage is the fear itself, not the object of it. That's so important to know. The direst foe of courage is the fear itself, not the object of it. And the man who can overcome his own terror is a hero and more. I was just reading about that in Judges 6 last night. Judges 6 and 7. God goes to, Latoya Okia was talking about it recently. She got a word when she was praying. But the angel of the Lord goes to Gideon and says, you are a hero of God, a mighty man of valor, right? And it's such a cool passage. It's such a cool passage. Because she's declaring that over us. So you are, and then it says, the man or woman, right? Who can always, because man and woman came out of the same, anyway. God pulled Eve out of Adam. So when they say man, it's all mankind, man and womankind. Anyway, you got to study that yourself, because I had to study that a lot to understand it. The mystery, it's a mystery. So he says, the man who can overcome his own terror or her own terror is a hero and more. And this Fergus had not yet deserved to be successful. That kind of victory comes only of faith. Still, he did not fly the field. He was no coward. At the same time, prizing courage, scorning fear, and indeed disbelieving in every nocturnal object of terror except robbers, he came at last to such an all but abandonment of dread that he dared not look over his shoulder lest he should see the brownie standing at his back. He would rather be seized from behind and strangled in his hairy grasp than turn and die of the seeing. The night was dark, no moon and many clouds. Not a sound came from the close? Anyway. The cattle, the horses, the pigs, the cocks and hens, the very cats and rats seemed asleep. There was not a rustle in the thatch, a creak in the couples. It was well, for the slightest noise would have brought his heart into his mouth, and he would have been in great danger of scaring the household and forever disgracing himself with a shriek. Yet he longed to hear something stir. I don't want to laugh, because I know how hard it is to be courageous in the midst of fear. I don't want to judge anybody. Oh, for the stamp of a horse. Yet he longed to hear something stir. Oh, for the stamp of a horse from the stable, or the low of a cow from the byre. But they were all under the brownie's spell, and he was coming, toeless feet and thumbed but fingerless hands. He's just saying that, right? As if he was made with stockings and humil mittens. I don't know what hummel mittens are. Woolen mittens? Maybe it's a kind of wool. Was it the want of toes that made him able to come and go so quietly? Another hour crept by, when lo, a mighty sun trumpet blew in the throat of the rooster. I'll just say the rooster. Fergus sprang to his feet with the start it gave him, but the next moment gladness rushed up in his heart. The morning was on its way, and foe to superstition as he was, and much as he had mocked at Donald for what he counted some of his tendencies in that direction, he began instantly to comfort himself with the old belief that all things of the darkness flee from the crowing of the cock in the morning, the rooster. Well, this is what happened. Remember when Jesus said, when the cock crows 3 times, or the cock crows in the morning, you'll have betrayed me 3 times, like disowned me, not betrayed me like Judas. Peter's like, no, I never knew the guy, and some people say that there is a morning person who would blow some kind of a trumpet, and he was called the rooster, that would remind you to get up in the morning and read the Holy Scriptures. And that was the rooster that Peter saw. But I don't know if it's an animal. Either way, it's still the calling of a sound that reminded him of what Jesus had said, because he said, I would die for you. I would die for you, darling, if you want me to. Jesus did for us, right? Anyway, he followed through. Peter did not, but Peter learned and taught us after that, and then died a martyr. He did die for Christ afterwards, for the believing of him, because the enemy gets all mad about that and tries to attack you. So don't think that, anyway, just ask God for his protection, and while the enemy is trying to attack you, you'll grow strong. Anyway. So when the gray of the dawn appeared, he said to himself he would lie down on the bench a while. He was so tired of sitting, he would not sleep. He lay down, and in a moment was asleep. The light grew and grew, and the brownie came, a different brownie indeed from the one he had pictured, with the daintiest shaped hands and feet coming out of his midst of rags, and with no hair except roughly parted curls over the face of a cherub, for the combing of Snowball's mane and tail had taught Gibbie to use the same comb upon his own hair. He used the horse's brush, because no one ever taught him. His mom died when he was young. But as soon as he opened the door of the dairy, he was warned by the loud breathing of the sleeper, and looking about, espied him on the bench behind the table, and swiftly retreated. The same instant, Fergus woke, stretched himself, and saw it was broad daylight, and with his brain muddled by fatigue and sleep combined, crawled shivering to bed. Then in came the brownie again, and when Jean Maver entered, there was her work done as usual. Fergus was hours late for breakfast, and when he went into the common room, found his aunt alone there. Well, auntie, he said, I think I fligget, your brownie. Did ye that, man? Aye, saying ye set to. But anyway, she said, save yourself something. They're speaking the Scottish brogue that I don't know, so I'll show it here. I'll do my best. I've read it a bunch of times, so If you know it, feel free to write it in the comments for us. It's this paragraph here. Leia, come on. Oh, Leia. She knocked over her water again. All right, so there is a guy, anyway, that translated it, but I can't use his work. So anyway, so who did it then? He said, I was sitting here all night. And then she says, who did it then? Oh, just yourself, I'm thinking, Auntie. Never a finger of mine was laid to it, Fergus. Given you forgot about the brownie either, or there's work to be done, the same as ever. And he says, damn the creature, cried Fergus. That's just him cursing anyway. Sorry if there's kids around. West, laddie, he may be hearing you this minute. And gonna Bennett, there's he doesn't like the swearing. Don't swear, right? I beg your pardon, Auntie, but it's just provoking, returned Fergus, and therewith recounted the tale of his night's watch, omitting mention only of his feelings throughout the vigil, his, of dread and fear. Anyway, as soon as he had his breakfast, he went to carry his report to Glashruach. The laird was vexed, and told him he must sleep well before the night and watch to better purpose. The next night Fergus' terror returned in full force, but he watched thoroughly, notwithstanding, and when his aunt entered, she found him there in her kitchen in a mess, because Sir Gibbie, I might have called him Curdy before, but Sir Gibbie didn't get to come in. Anyway, he had caught no brownie, it was true, but neither had a stroke of her work been done. The floor was unswept, not a dish had been washed. It was churning day, but the cream stood in the jar in the dairy, not butter in the pan in the kitchen dresser. Jean could not quite see the good or gain of it. She had begun to feel like a lady, she said to herself, because someone was serving her instead of her serving the whole household. She said to herself, and now she must tuck up her sleeves and set to work as before. It was a calm down in the world, and she did not like it. This is awesome. Okay, well, I really want to get through the hard part for this, so I'm going to keep reading. She conned her nephew little thanks, and not being in the habit of dissembling, let him feel the same. He crept to bed rather mortified. When he woke from a long sleep, he found no meal waiting for him, waiting him, and had to content himself with cakes and milk before setting out for the muckle house, the laird's house. Good girl, just sit, Leia. I mean, I guess she could walk about. Anyway, you must add cunning to courage, my young friend, said Mr. Galbraith, and the result of their conference was that Fergus went home resolved on yet another attempt. He felt much inclined to associate Donald with him in his watch this time, but was too desirous of proving his courage, both to himself and to the world, to yield to the suggestion of his fear. He went to bed with a book immediately after the noonday meal and rose in time for supper. There was a large wooden press in the kitchen, standing out from the wall. This, with the next wall, made a little recess in which there was just room for a chair, and in that recess Fergus seated himself in the easiest chair he could get into it. He then opened wide the doors of the press, and it covered him entirely. I don't know what he's talking about, but that's where he's hiding. The night would have been the dreariest of all for him, the laird having insisted that he should watch in the dark, had he not speedily fallen fast asleep and slept all night so well that he woke at the first noise Gibbie made. It was broad, clear morning, but his heart beat so loud and fast with apprehension and curiosity mingled that for a few moments Fergus dare not stir, but sat listening breathless to the movement beside him. None the less appalling that it was so quiet. Recovering himself a little, he cautiously moved to the door of the press and peeped out. He saw nothing so frightful as he had, in spite of himself, anticipated, but was not therefore perhaps the less astonished. The dread brownie of his idea shrunk to a tiny, ragged urchin, someone that looks like a gypsy's child. That's how they look at him. With a wonderful head of hair, azure eyes, deft hands, noiselessly bustling about on bare feet, he watched him at his leisure, watched him keenly, assured that any moment he could spring upon him. In the footnotes, it says it amuses a Scotchman to find the word cakes, as in the land of cakes, is taken not only by foreigners, but by some English people, as how indeed should it otherwise, to mean compositions of flour more or less enriched and generally appreciable, whereas in fact stands for the driest, simplest preparations in the world. The genuine cakes is, my grammar follows usage, cake is, broth are, literally nothing but oatmeal made into dough with cold water and dried over the fire, sometimes then in front of it as well. Okay, so that's what the cakes were. That he only had that for dinner or the breakfast the day before. All right, as he watched, his wonder sank, and he grew disappointed at the collapsing of the lubber fiend into a poor, half-naked child upon whom both his courage and his fear had been wasted. He continued to watch. An evil cloud of anger at the presumption of the unknown minimus began to gather in his mental atmosphere, and was probably the cause of some movement by which his chair gave a loud creak. Without even looking round, Gibbie darted into the dairy and shut the door. Instantly Fergus was after him, but only in time to see the vanishing of his last heel through the hole in the wall, and that way Fergus was much too large to follow him through the cat hole, right? Where the cat gets into the barn. But again, just one moment too late, leaving behind him on Fergus's retina the light from the soles of 2 bare feet. The key of the door to the rickyard was inside, and Fergus was after him in a moment, but the ricks came close to the barn door. And the next he saw of him was a fluttering of his rags in the wind, and the flashing of his white skin in the sun as he fled across the clover field. And before Fergus was over the wall, Gibbie was a good way ahead, towards the lorry. Gibbie was a better runner for his size than Fergus, and in better training too. Training, that's awesome. That's what I did on my way here. Ran up some of the hills. All right. But alas, Fergus's legs were nearly twice as long as Gibbie's. The little one reached the lorry first, and dashing across it, ran up the side of the Glashburn with a vague idea of Glashgar in his head. Fergus behind him was growing more and more angry as he gained upon him, but felt his breath failing him. Just at the bridge to the iron gate of Glashruach, he caught him at last and sunk on the parapet, exhausted. The smile which Gibbie, too much out of breath to laugh, confessed himself vanquished, would have disarmed one harder-hearted than Fergus, had he not lost his temper in the dread of losing his labour. Because so Fergus had lost his temper, not Gibbie. And the answer Gibbie received to his smile was a box on the ear that bewildered him. He looked pitifully into his captor's face, the smile not yet faded from his, only to receive a box on the other ear, which, though a contrary and similar both at once, was not a cure, and the water gathered in his eyes. So he's starting to cry, right, from the pain. Fergus, a little eased in his temper by the infliction, it's masochistic, I don't know, I don't want to judge him right now, but and his breath by the wall of the bridge began to ply him with questions, but no answer following. His wrath rose again, and again he boxed both his ears without better result. Wow. Then came the question, what was he to do with the redoubted Brownie now that he had him? He was ashamed to show himself as the captor of such a miserable culprit, but the little rascal deserved punishment, and the laird would require him at his hands. He turned upon his prisoner and told him he was an impudent rascal. Gibbie had recovered again and was able once more to smile a little. He had been guilty of burglary, said Fergus, and Gibbie smiled. He could be sent to prison for it, said Fergus, and Gibbie smiled. He didn't understand what he was saying, right? He could hear, but he didn't know what that meant because he never took a thing on purpose in his life. He had some cheese, but he thought it was common, like growing on a tree type of thing. Gibbie smiled, but this time a very grave smile. Fergus took him by the collar, which amounted to nearly a third part of the jacket, and shook him till he had half torn that third from the other two, then opened the gate, and holding him by the back of his neck, walked him up the drive, every now and then giving him a fierce shake that jarred his teeth. Thus, over the old gravel, mossy and damp and grassy and cool, to his little bare feet, between rowan and birk and pine and larch, like a malefactor, and looking every inch the outcast he was, did Sir Gilbert Galbraith, that's who this is, right, approach the house of his ancestors for the first time. So we're seeing, foretaste. Individually, wee Gibbie was anything but a prodigal. It had never been possible to him to be one, but nonetheless was he the type and result and representative of his prodigal race. In him now once more looking upon the house they had lost by their vices and weaknesses, because his grandfather and his father drank and lost all of this property to alcohol, as we do to our vices. It's a cautionary tale in that respect. Forgive yourself and repent. If whatever dark path we've been on, I know I did something foolish yesterday, just not stood up for something that I ought to have. And it was horrible, grievous. It was horrible, horrible. But God forgives you, and he cures you, and he sanctifies you. Just go to him anyway. We'll go. And so by their vices and weaknesses, and in him now beginning to reap the benefits of punishment. But of vice and loss, of house and fathers and punishment, Gibbie had no smallest cognition. He didn't know. His history was about him and in him, because he always lived in the present moment, right? Yet of it all, he suspected nothing. It would have made little difference to him if he had known it all. He would nonetheless have accepted everything that came, just as part of the story in which he would nonetheless have accepted, even if it came good fortune, even just as part of the story in which he found himself. So he's in the story. All right, you accept what is. Not saying you like it. Anyway, you can. Chapter 21, the punishment. The house he was approaching had a little look of a prison. Of the more ancient portion, the windows were very small. Every corner had a turret with a conical cap roof. That part was all rough cast, therefore grey, as if with age. The more modern part was built of all kinds of hard stone, roughly cloven or blasted from the mountain and its boulders, granite red and grey, blue whinstone, yellow ironstone, were all mingled. Anyhow, fitness of size and shape alone regarded in their conjunctions, but the result as to colour was rather pleasing than otherwise, and Gibbie regarded it with some admiration. Nor, although he had received from Fergus some such convincing proof that he was regarded as a culprit, had he any dread of evil awaiting him. He just didn't. He wasn't used to that happening. He'd seen it happen to one person before, unjustly. That's in the earlier chapters, but, welcome if you're just here today. Stay along. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. It will change your life. Anyway, I guess they said George MacDonald was friends with Mark Twain, and also Lewis Carroll, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland. Like, he wouldn't have written it if it weren't for George MacDonald's encouragement, I heard at one time. Anyway, there's just someone up top. All right, I'll turn it around if well, you can see there's still just all this fog. The ocean's straight down there. It's so thick, the fog. I didn't know if it would clear, and I was thinking of life. Like, you don't know if the fog's going to clear by the time you get up to the top, but it'll eventually clear. We've had lots of videos with a clear ocean behind and the sun shining on us, and the sun setting as well. It sets right there, and I used to come at sunset, but my schedule changed. But it was awesome because we're reading and the sun's just setting slowly behind. So you can look up if you want to see maybe the Princess and the Curdy. I started doing that, or all of the mysticism with Evelyn Underhill, studying the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. A lot of those I was out here because I remember I had to run back because the coyotes would come out after dusk. And anyway, talk about having courage. All for our awesome videos, and I love seeing the sunset myself in nature. Anyway, so let's go back. Proof that he was regarded as a culprit, but had he any dread of evil awaiting him? The highest embodiment of the law with which he had acquaintance was the police, and from not one of them in all the city had he ever had a harsh word, because he helped them. find stuff that people lost all over the city, and they thought he was a bit lost in the head, so they treated him kindly. But anyway, never had he heard a harsh word. His conscience was as void of offense as ever it had been, and the law, consequently, notwithstanding the threats of Fergus, had for him no terrors. He wasn't worried about the law. He was cleaning their house, and making their breakfast for them. What, right? Without getting paid, she would give Donald extra food because she thought it was Donald for a while, and Donald was giving his food to Curdy, because Sir Gibbie. Curdy is in this other story, The Princess and the Goblin, Princess and Curdy. He was giving it to Sir Gibbie, as Sir Gibbie would help him watch the cows. Anyway, the laird was an early riser, and therefore regarded the mere getting up early as a virtue, altogether irrespective of how the time thus redeemed, as he called it, was spent. So he redeemed the morning time, but, was it spent reading the Holy Scripture, or worshiping God, or honoring God for this day, or whatever? Oh, there's a hawk in the sky. Look, do you see that? I don't think it's a crow. Usually the hawks are together. I don't know if I'm getting it in the camera. It's so cool in the fog. Anyway, let's go back to this. I'm covered with kisses. I just was thinking, it says, there's this verse, greet each other with a holy kiss. And we're in a cloud of great witnesses. So all the saints send their love to us. Because it was a little chilly, so I put my sweatshirt on that was in the back of my car when I got my backpack. Oh, with our book for us. So anyway, let's go. I'll try not to interrupt. But nature, right? The hawk is coming right over us. Is it a hawk? Oh, the sun's coming out. Look. I can see it now. I couldn't see it before. All right. This is the hard part, so I think I'm procrastinating some, but let's get through it so we can get to the other side of it too. Thus redeemed, as he called it, he didn't care how it was spent. This morning, as it turned out, it would have been better spent in sleep. He was talking to his gamekeeper, a heavy-browed man, by the coach house door, when Fergus appeared, holding the dwindled brownie by the huge collar of his tatters, this tattered clothing. A more innocent-looking malefactor sure never appeared before awful justice. Only he was in rags, and there are others besides dogs whose judgments go by appearance. Right? The dogs didn't judge him by his rags. Mr. Galbraith was one of them, and smiled a grim and ugly smile. So this is your vaunted brownie, Mr. Duff, he said, and stood looking down upon Gibbie, as if in his small person he saw superstition at the point of death, mocked thither by the arrows of his contemptuous wit. It's all the brownie I could lay hands on, sir, answered Fergus. I took him in the act. Boy, said the laird, rolling his eyes, more unsteady than usual with indignation, in the direction of Gibbie, what have you to say for yourself? Gibbie had no say, and nothing to say that his questioner could either have understood or believed. The truth from his lips would but have presented him a lying hypocrite to the wisdom of his judge. As it was, he smiled, looking up fearless in the face of the magistrate, so awful in his own esteem. What is your name? Asked the laird, speaking yet more sternly. Gibbie smiled and was silent, looked straight in his questioner's eye. He dreaded nothing from the laird. Fergus had beaten him, but Fergus he classed with the bigger boys who had occasionally treated him roughly. Like in the city, they would sometimes bully him, right? With the bigger boys who had occasionally treated him roughly. This was a man, and men, except they were foreign sailors or drunk, were never unkind. He had no idea of his silence causing annoyance. Everybody in the city had known he could not answer, and now when Fergus and the laird persisted in questioning him, he thought they were making kindly game of him, and smiled the more. Nor was there much about Mr. Galbraith to rouse a suspicion of the contrary, right? He doesn't know that he's not able to speak. For he had made a great virtue of keeping his temper when most he caused other people to lose theirs, right? I see the young vagabond is as impertinent as he is vicious. What? Vicious for cleaning everyone's stuff and taking care of the horses. He said at last, finding that to no interrogation could he draw forth any other response than a smile. Here, Angus, said he, and he turned to the gamekeeper, take him into the coach house and teach him a little behavior. A touch or two of the whip will find his tongue for him. Angus seized the little gentleman by the neck as if he had been a polecat, and at arm's length walked him unresistingly into the coach house. There, with one vigorous tug, he tore the jacket from his back, and his only other garment, dependent thereupon by some device known only to Gibbie, fell from him, and he stood in helpless nakedness, smiling still. He had never done anything shameful, therefore had no acquaintance with shame. But when the scowling keeper, to whom poverty was first cousin to poaching, and who hated tramps as he hated vermin, approached him with a heavy cart whip in his hand, he cast his eyes down at his white sides, very white between his brown arms and brown legs, and then lifted them in a mute appeal, which somehow looked as if it were for somebody else. Against he could no longer fail to perceive the man's intent. Now he could see, but he had no notion of what the thing threatened amounted to. He had had few hard blows in his time, and had never felt a whip. Your deal's glar, cried the fellow, like a devil's working or something, cried the fellow, clenching the cruel teeth of one who loved not his brother. Eyes, lest you know what comes, and breaking into honest houses and taking what's not yours. And so a vision of the gnawed cheese, which he had never touched since the idea of it being property awoke in him, rose before Gibbie's mental eyes, and inwardly he bowed to the punishment. But the look he had fixed on Agnes was not without effect, for the man was a father, though a severe one, and was not all a brute. He turned and changed the cart whip for a gig one with a broken shaft which lay near. Thank God, right? It was well for himself that he did so, for the other would probably have killed Gibbie. When the blow fell, the child shivered all over, his face turned white, and without uttering even a moan, he doubled up and dropped senseless. A swollen cincture like a red snake had risen all round his waist, and from one spot in it the blood was oozing, and it looked as if the lash had cut him in two. The blow had stung his heart, and it had ceased to beat. But the gamekeeper understood vagrants. The young blackguard was only shamming, right? You try to take that with a naked body, right? Anyway, up ye with you devil, and I gurve you. And he said between his teeth, lifting the whip for a second blow, just as the stroke fell, marking him from the nape all down. So now it's like this, and it was like that. So it's in the shape of a cross now. All down the spine. So that he now bore upon his back, in red, the sign the ass carries in black. A piercing shriek assailed Agnes's ears, and his arm, which had mechanically raised itself for a third blow, hung arrested. The same moment, in at the coach house door, shot Ginevra. As white as Gibbie, she darted to where he lay, and there stood over him, arms rigid and hands clenched hard, shivering as he had shivered, and sending from her body shriek after shriek, as if her very soul were the breath of which her cries were fashioned. It was as if the woman's heart in her felt its roots torn from their home in the bosom of God, and quivering in agony, and confronted by the stare of an eternal impossibility, shrieked against Satan. Going away, missy, cried Agnes, who had respect to this child, though he had not yet learned to respect childhood. He's a coarse creature and must have his whoops. But Ginevra was deaf to his evil charming. She stopped her cries, however, to help Gibbie up, and took one of his hands to raise him. But his arms hung limp and motionless. She let it go. It dropped like a stick, and again she began to shriek. Angus laid his hand on her shoulder. She turned on him, and opening her mouth wide, screamed at him like a wild animal, with all the hatred of mingled love and fear, then threw herself on the boy, covered his body with her own. Agnes, stooping to remove her, saw Gibbie's face and became uncomfortable. He's died! You've killed him, Angus! You're an ill man," she cried fiercely. "I hate you, I tell on you. I'll tell my papa." "Hoot, wisht, missy," said Angus. "It was by your papa's own orders I gave him the whoop, and he well deserved it for me. And going down be a good laddie, and I'll get you get your mare yet or something. I'll get him here yet. "I'll tell God," shrieked Ginevra with fresh energy of defensive love and wrath. Again he sought to remove her, but she clung so with both her legs and arms to the insensible Gibbie, and he could but lift both together and had to leave her alone. And he couldn't but lift them together, so he had to leave her alone. "Go and don't you dare touch him again, Angus. I'll bite you," she screamed in a passage wildly crescendo. The laird said and Fergus had walked away together, perhaps neither of them quite comfortable at the orders given, but this one too self-sufficient to recall them, and the other too submissive to interfere. They heard the cries, nevertheless, and had they known them for Ginevra's, would have rushed to the spot. But fierce emotion had so utterly changed her voice, and indeed she had never in her life cried out before, that they took them for Gibbie's, and supposed the whip had had the desired effect and loosed his tongue. As to the rest of the household, which would by this time have been all gathered in the coach-house, the laird had taken his stand where he could intercept them. He would not have the execution of the decrees of justice interfered with. But Ginevra shrieked, but brought Gibbie to himself. Faintly he opened his eyes and stared, stupid with growing pain, at the tear-blurred face beside him. In the confusion of his thoughts, he fancied the pain he felt was Ginevra's, not his, and sought to comfort her, stroking her cheek with feeble hand and putting up his mouth to kiss her. Aw, there's the kisses again. I almost didn't buy this, and I was just in like this meditative state, and it was like God wanted me to buy this, and I did not know why. I thought it was just anyway, it's the kiss of life of God, of the saints. Greet each other with a holy kiss, right? Like the kiss of a husband and wife is a beautiful thing that bonds them, it's wonderful. Anyway, but Angus, utterly scandalized at the proceeding and restored to energy. The first kiss he ever had was from this dog that was licking him and helping him. But Angus, utterly scandalized at the proceeding and restored to energy by seeing that the boy was alive, caught her up suddenly and carried her off, struggling, writhing, and scratching like a cat. Indeed, she bit his arm, and that severely. But the man never even told his wife. Little Missy was a queen, and little Gibbie was a vermin. But he was ashamed to let the mother of his children know that the former had bitten him for the sake of the latter. The moment she thus disappeared, Gibbie began to apprehend that she was suffering for him, not he for her. His whole body bore testimony to frightful abuse. This was some horrible place, inhabited by men such as those that killed his friend in the city. Sam, I'll just call him Sam. All right. He must fly, but would they hurt the little girl? He thought not. She was at home. He started to spring to his feet, but fell back almost powerless, then tried more cautiously and got up wearily, for the pain and the terrible shock seemed to have taken the strength out of every limb. Oh, the sun's coming out. I see some blue in the sky. You see it? The clouds going. The marine layer is lifting. All right. That's so awesome. That's so cool. It feels like we're in a movie set. We're not. Doesn't it feel like it though? Like, all right, we have 15 more minutes or so. I really want to get through to the good part. I mean, this is good that she protected him and yelled for him and bit Angus, right? The moment she thus disappeared. Okay, so he every limb. Once on his feet, he could scarcely stoop to pick up his garment of trousers without again falling, and the effort made him groaned with distress. He was in the act of trying in vain to stand on one foot so as to get the other into the garment when he fancies he heard the step of his executioner returning doubtless to resume his torture. He dropped the rag and darted out of the door, forgetting aches and stiffness and agony. And naked as he was, he fled like the wind, unseen or at least unrecognized of any eye. Fergus did catch a glimpse of something white that flashed across a vista through the neighboring wood, but he took it for a white peacock, of which there were 2 or 3 about the place. The 3 men were disgusted with the little wretch when they found that he had actually fled into the open day without his clothes. Go figure, right? Poor Gibbie. It was such a small difference. It needed as little change to make a savage as an angel of him. All depended on the eye that saw him. Right? He ran, he knew not whither, feeling nothing but the desire first to get into some covert and then to run farther. His first rush was for the shrubbery, the next across a little park to the wood beyond. He did not feel the wind of his running on his bare skin. He did not feel the hunger that had made him so unable to bear the lash. On and on he ran, fancying ever he heard the cruel Angus behind him. If a dry twig snapped, he thought it was the crack of the whip. He's getting, he has PTSD now, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And a small wind that rose suddenly in the top of a pine seemed the hiss with which it was about to descend upon him. If you've ever been ghosted, then just let God heal you, because and don't let it keep you from loving people and getting to know people and letting your childhood be healed, because people can have PTSD from that as well. I know, because I've made over 1,700 videos, trying to help us heal from a bad experience that I had. That just reminded me of things in childhood. It wasn't just that person. Anyway, it wasn't just Angus. Angus represents the people in this world that are under the evil influence of the evil one, that do evil things in moments of time. But we can forgive everyone, right? And we don't excuse them, and we don't go around them if they're going to keep holding a whip and acting such, but we can forgive completely. Jesus says we must forgive, or we don't experience the forgiveness of God, because our hearts are hardened, That's why. How can you experience the forgiveness of God? Anyway, we must be like a little child. All right, so he ran, he knew not whither, feeling nothing but desire first to get into some covert. Okay, he ran and ran. And a small wind that rose suddenly in top of a pine seemed the hiss with which it was about to descend upon him. Whoosh. He ran and ran, but still there seemed nothing between him and his persecutors. He felt no safety. At length he came where a high wall joining some water formed a boundary. The water was a brook from the mountain. Here widened and deepened into a still pool. Oh, that scared me. That was Leia. He had been once out of his depth before. He threw himself in and swam straight across. Ever after that, swimming seemed to him as natural as walking. Then first awoke a faint sense of safety. For on the other side, he was knee-deep in heather. The greenery, right? He was on the wild hill with miles on miles of cover. Here, the unman could not catch him. It must be the same that Donald pointed out to him one day at a distance. He had a gun, and Donald said he had once shot a poacher and killed him. He did not know what a poacher was. Perhaps he was one himself, and the man would shoot him. It's still so awesome up here. The smells, do you hear the birds? I'm so glad he got up the hill, right? Just like we're on a hill. He must cross the knoll first, and then he might lie down and rest. He would get right into the heather and lie with it all around him and over him till the night came. Where he would go then, he did not know, but it was all one. He could go anywhere. Donald must mind his cows, and the men must mind their horses, and Mistress Jean must mind her kitchen, but Sir Gibbie could go where he pleased. He would go up Daurside, but he would not go just at once. The men might be on the outlook for him, and he wouldn't like to be shot. People who were shot lay still and were put into holes in the earth and covered up, and he would not like that. His father died around him from drinking too much. Thus he communed with himself as he went over the... Just that we have our breath in our lungs today. I keep seeing that. Look, the sun is shining on us. Right? It's just, we have another chance. Lauryn Hill sings it. And you are my peace of mind. She's like, every day's another chance to get it right this time. Anyway, you are my peace of mind. That old me is left behind. It's just like in baptism. We die to our old self and raise to newness of life. Anyway, okay, so I wanted him to get to the next place. Anyway, but we got to be where we are, right? It's as much as we don't like it sometimes, but I'm so glad he's in safety. Anyway, thus he communed with himself as he went over the knoll. On the other side, he chose a tall patch of heather and crept under. How nice and warm and kind the heather felt, though it did hurt the wheels dreadfully sometimes where he got cut, I think, is called that. Anyway, my hair is all like this from the fog. If he only had something to cover just them, there seemed to be one down his back as well as round his waist, right? And now Sir Gibbie, though not much poorer than he had been, really possessed nothing separable except his hair and his nails, nothing, therefore, that he could call his as distinguished from him. His sole other possession was a negative quantity, his hunger, namely, for he had not even a meal in his body. He had eaten nothing since the preceding noon. I am wrong. He had one possession besides, though hardly a separable one, a ballad about a fair lady and her page, which Donald had taught him. So he learned the ballad so he could say it in his head, right? That's wonderful. That's like verses when you learn Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I lack nothing. I lack nothing. There's nothing I lack. Which Donald had taught him. That he now began to repeat to himself, but was disappointed to find it a good deal withered. He was not nearly reduced to extremity yet, though. This little heir of the world, he's an heir of the whole world, right? Because the earth is the Lord's, is God's, and all that therein is. So God gives it all to us kindly. Anyway, he's the heir of the world because he's got nothing left, so he sees it. In his body he had splendid health, in his heart a great courage, and in his soul an ever-throbbing love. It was his love to the very image of man that made the horror of the treatment he had received. Wow. When you love people, you don't understand, when they act in cruel ways, or when our own selves can, out of lack of courage, and our own insecurity. We can as well. I'm not saying we're above that. God forgive us for every idle word and every wrong action. Anyway. So, okay. I love the clouds going away right now and the sun shining. All right. Heir of the world. Let's see where we were. It was his love to the very image of man that made the horror of the treatment he had received. Angus was and was not a man. After all, Gibbie was still one to be regarded with holy envy. Poor Jenny was sent to bed for interfering with her father's orders, and with what rage and horror and pity and inexplicable feelings of hopelessness took possession of her, while her affection for her father was greatly, perhaps for this world, irretrievably injured by that morning's experience, right? How can you love and forgive someone? It's important to forgive, but you thought someone wasn't that cruel, and then they turned out to be so, and they can always repent and change, right? And you wish that and pray that for everybody and for yourself, right? Anyway, so he was saying Agnes was a man and was not a man, because a true man and true woman does not do such things. God help us. God help us. Anyway, something remained that never passed from her, and that something, as often as it stirred, rose between him and her father and her. Fergus told his aunt what had taken place and made much game of her brownie. Fergus told his Aunt Jean, who had, for months, her work had been done for her. But the more Jean thought about the affair, the less she liked it. It was she upon whom it all came. What did it matter who or what her brownie was? And what had they whipped the creature for? What harm had he done? If indeed he was a little ragged urchin, the thing was only the more inexplicable. He had taken nothing. She had never missed so much as a barley scone. The cream had always brought her the right quantity of butter, and not even a bannock, so far as she knew, was ever gone from the press, or an egg from the bossy where they lay heaped. There was more in it than she could understand. Her nephew's mighty feat, so far from explaining anything, had only sealed up the mystery. She could not help cherishing a shadowy hope that, when things had grown quiet, he would again reveal his presence by his work, if not by his visible person. It was mortifying to think that he had gone as he came, and she had never set eyes upon him. But Fergus's account of his disappearance had also, in her judgment, a decided element of the marvelous in it. She was strongly inclined to believe that the brownie had cast a glamour. Oh gosh, hold on 1 second. My nose starts running when I start crying, over him and the laird and Angus, all three, and had been making game of them for his own amusement. Indeed, Daurside generally refused the explanation of the brownie presented for its acceptance, and the laird scored nothing against the arch-enemy, superstition, right? Donald Grant, missing his creature, hello creature, he called him that as a good thing, that day for the first time heard enough when he came home to satisfy him that he had been acting the brownie in the house and the stable as well as in the field. Incredible as it might well appear that such a child should have even more strength for what he did. Then first also, after he had thus lost him, he began to understand his worth and to see how much he owed him. While he had imagined himself kind to the urchin had been laying him under endless obligation, right, by helping so many people. He helped the people that were feeding Donald, right, and watching the cows, which gave him the money from the owner, the farm owner. Anyway, while he imagined himself kind to the urchin had been laying him under endless obligation, for he left him with ever so much more in his brains than when he came. This book and that, though through his aid he had read thoroughly, and a score or so of propositions had been added to his stock in Euclid, because he had time to read Euclid, because Sir Gibbie the boy helped watch the cows and stuff. So so Donald could sit and read his books. His first feeling about the child revived as he pondered, namely, that he was not of this world. But even then, Donald did not know the best Gibbie had done for him. He did not know of what far deeper and better things he had, through his gentleness, his trust, his loving service, his absolute unselfishness, sown the seeds in his mind, in Donald's mind and heart, right? On the other hand, Donald had, in return, done more for Gibbie than he knew, though what he had done for him, namely, shared his dinners with him, and had been less of a gift than he thought. And Donald had rather been sharing in Gibbie's dinner than Gibbie and Donald's. So really, Donald had been sharing what Gibbie's part was. Oh, Leia, I'm sorry. She's been tied up this whole time. Hold on. All right, we're almost done, but I want to go to the last. This is chapter 22. Oh, and we said 2222, I think, at the beginning, or 222. Anyway, it was a lovely Saturday evening in Glashgar. The few flowers about, this is called Refuge. The few flowers about the small turf cottage scented the air in the hot western sun. The heather was not in bloom yet, and there were no trees, but there were rocks and stones, and a brawling burn, that's a river kind of thing, rivulet, that half surrounded a little field of oats, one of potatoes, and a small spot with a few stalks of cabbage and kale on the borders, of which grew some bushes of double daisies and primroses and carnations. These Janet tended as part of her household. while her husband saw to the oats and potatoes. Robert had charge of the few sheep on the mountain, which belonged to the farmer at the Mains, and for his trouble had the cottage and the land, most of which he had himself reclaimed. He had also a certain allowance of meal, which was paid in portions, as corn went from the farm to the mill. If they happened to fall short, the miller would always advance them as much as they needed, repaying himself, and not very strictly, the next time the corn was sent from the Mains. They were never in any want, and never had any money except what their children brought them out of their small wages. But that was plenty for their every need, nor had they the faintest feeling that they were persons to be pitied. It was very cold up there in winter, to be sure, and they both suffered from rheumatism, but they had no debt, no fear, much love, and between them, this being mostly Janet's, a large hope for what lay on the other side of death. As to the rheumatism, that was necessary, Janet said, to teach them patience, for they had no other trouble. They were indeed growing old, but neither had begun to feel age a burden yet, and when it should prove such, they had a daughter prepared to give up service and go home to help them. Their thoughts about themselves were nearly lost in their thoughts about each other, their children, and their friends. Janet's main care was her old man, and Robert turned to Janet as the one stay of his life, next to the God in whom he trusted. He did not think so much about God as she. He was not able, nor did he read so much of his Bible, but she often read to him, and when any of his children were there of an evening, he always took the book. While Janet prayed at home, his closet was the mountainside, where he would kneel in the heather and pray to him who saw unseen, the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God. The sheep took no heed of him, but sometimes when he rose from his knees and saw Oscar, their dog, right, gazing at him with deepest regard, he would feel a little as if he had not quite entered enough into his closet, and would wonder what the dog was thinking. All day from the mountain, the sky and preaching burns. From the sheep and his dog, from winter storms, spring sun and winds, or summer warmth and glow, but more than all, when he went home from the presence and influence of his wife, came to him somehow, who can explain how, spiritual nourishment and vital growth. One great thing in it was that he kept growing wiser and better without knowing it. If St. Paul had to give up judging his own self, perhaps Robert Grant might get through without ever beginning it. Wow. He loved life, but if he had been asked why, he might not have found a ready answer. He loved his wife just because she was Janet. Blithely, he left his cottage in the morning, deep breathing the mountain air as if it were his first in the blissful world, and all day the essential bliss of being was his. But the immediate hope of his heart was not the heavenly city, it was his home and his old woman, and her talk of what she had found in her Bible that day, strangely mingled even to confusion with his faith in God, was his absolute trust in his wife, a confidence not very different in kind from the faith which so many Christians place in the mother of our Lord. To Robert, Janet was one who knew, one who was for ben with the Father, far ben with the Father, like far en and knowing, a ken. It says ben, B-E-N, but I don't know what that is in Scottish language, right? With the Father of lights. She perceived his intentions, understood his words, did his will, dwelt in the secret place of the Most High. That's in Psalm 91 if you want to read it. When Janet entered into the kingdom of her father, she would see that she was not left outside. Oh, that he was not left outside. She would see it. She would make sure. She called it later when she's praying for people. She's leaving a door open for someone else, right? That's what interceding is for her. When Janet entered into the kingdom of her father, she would see that he was not left outside. He was as sure of her love to himself as he was of God's love to her, and was certain she could never be content without her old man. He was himself a dull soul, he thought, and could not expect the great God to take much notice of him, but he would allow Janet to look after him. He had a vague conviction that he would not be very hard to save, for he knew himself ready to do whatever was required of him. None of all this was plain to his consciousness, however, or I dare say he would have begun at once to combat the feeling. You know, he didn't know. Anyway, so guess who's going to come take refuge with Janet? We'll see. But I wanted to at least get to Janet's home. All right, much love. I got to go because, oh yeah, I got to run some, I think. Much love. Thanks for being here. Share. Oh, ocean. We can't see it yet. Oh, a little bit. I don't want to get the book in the... Oh. The ocean's right beyond there. Okay. There's the sky. All right, much love.